It's a Big Ten Western Division showdown, and don't check out just the standings, but you got to look into the schedule to see that this is still a big one in possibly deciding the Big Ten Western Division when Iowa visits Wisconsin this week. We got Tyler Hunt on the line from SB Nation's platform for Wisconsin Athletics, Bucky's Fifth Quarter. Tyler, how you doing today?
Good, really good. Ready to get back to action. Of course, the Badgers had a bye week last week and then 2 losses before that. So ready to get this thing back on track and hopefully compete for a West Division title because it still is within their grasp. But really, this Iowa-Wisconsin game is kind of an elimination game in that regard. So
exactly. So, Tyler, when we look at the bye weeks coming off just a slew of successful efforts where the team looked like an elite team, especially defensively, and then the downer against Illinois led to the real downer against Ohio State, 38-7. What do you think this team really focused on? Did Paul Chryst give us anything to go on in regards to what the focus was on during the bye week?
Well, I mean, yeah, he kind of did a little bit in his Monday presser. He was, he's not very talkative to begin with. If you've been around Coach Chryst, he's not a man of many words, but he did reflect on the bye week and said it was really good for his guys. I think to refocus and to show them that their goals are still in front of them. I know obviously they were hoping for a college football playoff appearance, but unfortunately that just isn't within their grasp anymore, but they can still make some noise and win that West Division with everything that they've got in front of them. And I think they took a lot of time to review the things that had worked in the first few weeks, and then, of course, review the things that had not worked in these past 3 weeks. So I think the bye week came at a perfect time for them. Obviously, you didn't expect that Illinois loss, but you kind of expected that Ohio State loss. So for them, this certainly comes at a good time to refocus and keep the Big Ten West Division, in their sights. And obviously, anytime you get that and get some extra rest, it helps on the injury front, but also helps to just refocus and get the team on the same page. So.
Yeah, so I alluded to the standings off the top of the segment. Minnesota stands at 5-0, Iowa, Wisconsin at 3-2. But what's in play is a backloaded Minnesota schedule that includes Penn State this week. And even if Minnesota gets past Penn State as an underdog of about a touchdown, they have to face those two teams. So the winner of this game gets the direct shot at Minnesota, considering that the Gophers would most likely, again, maybe they run the table, maybe they only lose one game, maybe they are the best team in the Big Ten Western Division, but that remains to be seen. As it stands right now, Iowa and Wisconsin would both be decided favorites against Minnesota as well. So the winner of this game could get a direct shot at winning the Big Ten Western Division with a head-to-head against Minnesota. Granted, if the Gophers lose to either Penn State or the other team, being Iowa or Wisconsin, and then it creates the logjam tie at 7-2, and the winner of this game would win out against Minnesota. All right, so that's the situation there. When I look at Iowa and Wisconsin, and I made a stupid mistake in my predictions, Tyler, and I will be the first one to admit it. So during the off season, all I thought about was Wisconsin, Iowa. Who am I going to decide is going to win this division? That was my thought process the entire offseason. These are the two most solid teams, programs, the whole thing, top to bottom. And then all this Nebraska talk got to me like 10 days before the season started, and I went, you know what? Yeah, I think they can pull this thing off, and I picked Nebraska. But these are the two best teams in the division. I think that's still going to stand up. And it's always a hard-fought battle between just offensive linemen, defensive line play. If you like that kind of old-style Big Ten football, these are your two teams.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you bought into the Nebraska hype train, which I did myself, and I think everybody did and bought into that. And of course, we haven't seen that, but on paper, I still think Wisconsin and Iowa were the two strongest teams coming into it. And it's kind of played out that way. But Minnesota has certainly been a surprise, and it's good for the conference to have a lot of teams in that running. I know we don't have the top heavy teams in the playoff conversation like Ohio State and Penn State, but it's still good for the division to be competitive because it really hasn't been as strong these past few weeks. But yeah, like you said, this game, if you love physical football, if you love defensive football, I would expect to see a lot of it in this matchup. Well, I know last year was your classic Iowa-Wisconsin game, which was back and forth, heavy hitting, low scoring, and time of possession were all keys in that one. So if you're expecting that hard-fought battle and really a game that's probably won in the trenches, You're going to get that again this week. You won't have like SMU Memphis with a lot of points last week. This one's probably going to be low scoring and hard fought, but it's a beautiful display of football. I've always loved Iowa, Wisconsin. I think it's from a fan perspective, it's one of the best Big Ten rivalries in the conference. So.
Absolutely. I know Paul Chris spoke of Nathan Stanley, who seems to have been around the Iowa program forever and leading this team since his freshman year. Your thoughts about just kind of starting there and kind of surveying the Iowa team and what stands out to you and what you think the key matchups will be?
Yeah, I mean, last year you saw Nate Stanley really pick apart the Badgers, especially on play action. I think he threw for like 250 yards, but a lot of those, I was watching the game back last night from last year, and a lot of those were off play action. Obviously, he had Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson to throw the ball to last year, and they killed the Badgers. And of course, they had a young secondary for Wisconsin last year, and they've grown a lot coming into the matchup this year. But I still think it's a game that the Badgers were going to have to be ready for, and they're really going to have to take away Stanley's ability to throw the football. Iowa hasn't ran the ball that well so far this season, and Wisconsin's been pretty tout against the run, other than, of course, J.K. Dobbins' big game a couple weeks ago. So you really expect Iowa, if they're going to come out and score points and win this game, it's going to be on the arm of Nathan Stanley. And on the offensive side for Wisconsin, I think the matchup to watch is going to be, what the Badgers do with Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, he's going to be the focal point, but I think eventually you've got to get some other weapons involved for the Badgers. They've got a deep receiving core, and they haven't used them yet this year. And if they want to score points, they had to throw the ball last year against Iowa to score points, and I think they're going to have to do that again this week. So I hope the Badgers will look to get some more players and people involved on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, Nathan Stanley at 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And again, he has led this Iowa offense since his freshman season. Torrin Young, Mekhi Sargent pretty much split the carries out of the backfield for the Hawkeyes, who again come in at 3-2 like Wisconsin and hoping for a Minnesota stumble. And then the winner of this game has direct shot at Minnesota. When you look at the Wisconsin effort, you alluded to it. I did as well against Ohio State. Of course, the Buckeyes might be the best team in the country, so that needs to be taken into consideration. But still, after the Illinois game, after the Ohio State game, are you thinking that Ohio State's that good, or maybe this Wisconsin team's not quite as good as advertised over those first 6 games? And of course, this is all going to play out against Iowa and Minnesota in particular in regards to grading this team against the best teams in the Big Ten Western Division. But your thoughts right now about, what the deficiencies might be?
Yeah, I mean, for Wisconsin, I think it's a mix of both. We probably aren't as good as we expected, given after that excitement in the Michigan and Michigan State games. But I don't think we're as bad as they've showed against Ohio State. You're never as good as your best game. You're never as bad as your worst game. And we've kind of seen that play out for Wisconsin over the course of that first half of the season, really. So I think the biggest issue and the focal point for Wisconsin really coming into this bye week, and of course Iowa, has been kind of the offensive line play. The Badgers haven't really ran the ball like we're used to seeing with a Wisconsin team. Usually Jonathan Taylor is getting 100 yards without a problem, and the offensive line is getting a push. And then, of course, they're usually pretty good in pass protection. And we haven't quite seen that. And Paul Chryst, of course, alluded to that in his presser. He kind of mentioned that they need to run the ball better and that they need to get some things cleaned up on the offensive line. And I think the bye week will really help that. So overall, I think the Badgers, this bye week really helped them refocus and figure out what team they are and what team they want to be. And of course, Iowa will be on the, looking out for that, because Kirk Ferentz and Paul Chryst know each other extremely well. So it'll be a key matchup on the offensive line in this football game.
You can get my selection on Wisconsin and Iowa and the rest of the Week 11 college football games in the link in the description section below next to Voice of College Football Community. And the predictions is just one part of it. Certainly, we push that we're building a community there, and you get an exclusive live stream offer from me each and every week. Speaking of the betting line, Tyler, I was shocked when I opened up the lines this morning and I saw 9.5 on the Wisconsin side. Of course, they're at home. I expect them, based on their play, that they've been a little bit better than Iowa, but I was a bit surprised by 9.5 points. Had a betting expert on with me, and he said the numbers speak to it. He's got the same. His model says 9 to 10 points in Wisconsin's favor.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it both ways. You know, I do a fair amount of college football betting as well. I was a little surprised by it. I feel like just given the offenses of these two teams, it's hard for any team to win by 10 points, just looking at it on paper. And then, of course, you've got the total sitting at 38. So relatively, they're expecting a relatively low scoring game and probably the lowest total of the weekend. So I think I don't think it'll be a slugfest like we've used to seeing. Obviously, when you talk about these two teams over the past 5 seasons, these two have really, other than one outlier in 2017 when Wisconsin won by 24, it's been pretty close. If you take that 24-point win out, these teams usually average margin of victory is like 6.5 points. So I would expect a low scoring game and a fair slugfest that way. And in my betting preview that I write for Bucky's Fifth Quarter, I kind of talked about that and what expect on the spread. But I think 9.5 points is a lot of points, just given what these offenses have shown and what these defenses have shown so far this season.
So there you go. Vegas says 38 points, and they like Wisconsin by 9. We're looking at 24-15, 23-15, something in that range. Kind of an odd score, but something in that range for the Badgers to get back into the Big Ten Western Division, and then that Minnesota game on the final weekend in Minneapolis. Tyler, we appreciate you stopping by to break down Wisconsin football once again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.